Happy St. Patrick's Day. I do have quite a bit of Irish ancestry in me. This is a map of Ireland, and my Scotch-Irish ancestors were largely from the Antrim area, which is northwest of Belfast. But then my actual Irish ancestors came from places like Dublin, Kildare, Carlow, and Kilkenny. I've had requests from some of my viewers that I do more baking, so in honor of St. Patrick's Day, I'm going to do a chocolate stout cake. Stout, the most famous being Guinness, is a very rich and dark and heavy Irish, not really a beer because it's stout, but along that line. I've got 1 cup of Irish stout. I've got 3/4 of a cup plus 2 tablespoons of cocoa powder, 2 eggs, 2 sticks of butter, 2 teaspoons of baking soda, 1 teaspoon of vanilla, 1/2 cup plus 2 tablespoons of sour cream, 2 1/4 cups of all-purpose flour, which I did sift, and then I've got sugar. I'm sorry, I forgot how much it was. 2 cups of sugar. The first step in this is going to be to melt the butter in a large saucepan because everything is going to be mixed in this pan. So we're going to put in our 2 sticks of butter as well as our 1 cup of Irish stout. And we're going to melt that down together. Not cooperating today. Okay, so we're going to go to the stove and melt this down. As the butter is melting in with the stout, I took my 9-inch cake pan, I sprayed it, then I lined it with parchment paper and sprayed it again, and I did use a springform pan. I want to make sure this cake releases and we have a beautiful cake at the end. I've also preheated the oven to 350 degrees. I'm going to crack my 2 eggs into a bowl to have them ready, but also to make sure I don't get any shells in there. This is a nice, dense, moist, chocolatey cake, but it's not supposed to have any crunch in it. So we're going to get those ready for when the butter is ready. I'm also going to whisk these eggs up just lightly. They'll incorporate more easily into the chocolate mixture that we're going to be making with the butter and the stout. So those are ready to go, and I'm going to check on the butter. If you've never tasted stout, its flavor is rich and dark and lingers on the tongue. It's going to make this cake moist and even more chocolatey. It's not going to taste like you're eating a pint of stout. Sláinte. The butter is melted and combined with the stout. We're going to continue on with the recipe. I have removed the butter mixture from the heat, and now I'm going to whisk in the sugar and the cocoa. Want to make sure that the sugar is completely dissolved, and if you do this while the butter mixture is still hot, it'll be a lot easier. Same for the cocoa. The mixture has come together. It's smooth and chocolatey, and already the beer, the aroma of the beer has taken a definite back seat to the chocolate. Now we're going to whisk in our sour cream. And you do want to do these in this order because number 1, we want everything well combined, but number 2, this is cooling down the chocolate a bit, so it's not going to scramble my eggs. You can see how velvety and chocolatey this is. I've got that all incorporated. I'm going to mix in the vanilla And this process of whisking is cooling down the chocolate mixture so I can add the eggs without worrying about scramble. I'm going to stream them in slowly nonetheless. Make sure they get well incorporated and whisk quickly. It's starting to thicken up from the eggs. I'm going to whisk in the baking soda. I want to make sure this is well incorporated so we get an even rise, and then slowly we're going to add our flour. I don't want to dump it all in at once. There's more chance of lumps that way. Plus you might get snowed on. No snow on St. Patrick's Day. At least not in Las Vegas. And it is getting nice and thick. I think I'm going to switch over to a rubber scraper. One of the properties the stout has when you mix it in with the flour and especially the baking soda, the sour cream and the stout both help the baking soda create a good rise. The stout also creates a nice thick cake batter so that you end up with a nice moist, fudgy kind of cake. At this point, you could mix in some chocolate chunks if you like, or even some dried tart cherries, but I'm going to stick with just my pure chocolate cake. And I'm going to put it into my lined and greased pan. Make sure that your spring-formed spring is closed or else everything's going to leak out. And this is quite heavy. This pan is heavy, but it conducts heat quite well. So you can see how beautiful that batter is coming out in just a gorgeous waterfall of chocolate. And I'm going to scrape this well so I get every bite of goodness. I'm going to smooth it out just a bit. That's the cooked snack. I'm going to put this into the oven 350 degrees for about 40 minutes and do the toothpick test to make sure that it's done. It is going to be moist, but you don't want it raw. I'm going to make a chocolate ganache filling for this cake. I've got a cup of heavy whipping cream. You can see it's quite thick. And I'm going to infuse it with mint. I've got fresh mint in my garden. So I just got a handful of fresh mint leaves. I washed them, no need to cut them up because I'm just doing an infusion, and then I will strain this. I'm going to put this on the stovetop on very low heat and let it infuse for 5 to 10 minutes or until the cream smells slightly minty. I have 8 ounces of semi-sweet chocolate. I've chopped it up fairly finely. If you chop it up nice and fine, it'll melt faster. You'll get a smoother ganache. And now I've got my mint infused cream, and I'm going to strain it so I don't get the leaves in there. And then we're just going to give it about a minute to start softening that chocolate, and then we're going to start stirring. We're going to stir slowly and continuously and just let that chocolate melt into the cream. If you wanted to give your ganache a little twist, you could replace part of the heavy cream with an Irish cream liqueur, but I'm putting that into my buttercream frosting, so I just want the chocolate and slightly minty ganache for my filling. You can see it's coming together. The chocolate is completely melted, but I want to make sure that it is completely combined with the cream. So we'll have a nice smooth ganache. And I like to let this cool and thicken just on the countertop. You can do it in the refrigerator as long as you make sure to go in there and stir it every little bit, because it will not cool evenly if you cool it in the refrigerator without stirring. So that is beautiful. We're going to let that thicken up. The cake is out of the oven. I'm going to put it on a wire rack to cool for about 10 minutes before I release the spring on this spring form pan. Handle it gently. This cake already has a tendency to sink in the middle slightly, and if you drop it on your counter, you're going to end up with a very sunken cake. My chocolate ganache has set up nicely. You can see it's thick but not stiff. And I transferred it to the bowl of my stand mixer, which I chilled in the freezer for a bit. I've whipped the ganache. You can see it's gotten fluffy, lighter in color, and about doubled in size. So now this is time to put the ganache, the whipped ganache, in the middle of my cake. The cake is cooled, so I'm going to run my offset spatula around there. And then I'm going to pop my spring. And voila. There's our cake. Now you can see that it did sink a little in the middle, but that's okay because I can fill that up with buttercream. I'm going to cut the cake in half, hopefully evenly. It's cutting very nicely, which means it's still moist inside. There we go. And I'm going to lift the top portion onto a flat plate, hopefully without cracking it. And just in the time since I took this off from the mixer, it's already started to set up. So I got to be gentle with this. I've got the ganache spread out. It's not maybe as smooth as I would want, but it's going to be covered up. And I'm going to place this cake, I'm going to cover it and place it in the fridge for just a little bit to make sure it's completely cooled, and then I'm going to frost it. Time to make buttercream for our cake. I've got 2 sticks of softened regular butter, and I'm just going to give those a quick whisk. And instead of adding vanilla and milk or cream, I'm going to start with one of these individual sized bottles of Irish cream liqueur. And I'm just going to use as much as I need. I've got 3½ cups of powdered sugar that I sifted. I'm going to add a little at a time so I don't get a powdered sugar explosion. And I'll just alternate the liqueur and the powdered sugar. You want to make sure you scrape down the bowl to ensure that all the butter is incorporated from the sides and especially from the bottom. These stand mixers have a little well at the bottom almost, and oftentimes things like butter or cream cheese are going to get stuck down there, so make sure you scrape. The buttercream is done. It's nice and thick but still spreadable. I did use almost the entire bottle of this. But if you don't have that, or you don't like the taste, or you don't want the alcohol, you can just use some half and half, and you'll get about the same result. All right, time to frost our cake. there's our beautiful buttercream. Now you could dye this green if you wanted to be a little more festive, but I sometimes think that the whole green thing is overdone on St. Patrick's Day. So I'm going to leave it its natural color, which is just a slightly creamy color because of the Irish cream liqueur. And you can see I'm just using an offset spatula to spread it. I'm only going to frost the top. You could also, if you wanted to, go onto your computer, get a clip art of a shamrock, cut it out to make yourself a little stencil, and then you could put some green sprinkles or sugar. But I'm just going straight frosting. I want the flavor to be what's speaking out more than decoration. This isn't a birthday cake. And you don't need to have St. Patrick's Day as an excuse to make this cake. This cake could be good any time of the year. It would be especially good with a cup of coffee. And you can see the frosting is pretty thick, but it's still very spreadable. It's with the consistency I want. Last little bit of it there. Get it out to the edges. If you want to be fancy, you can just do some little swirls or something. You could get a baker's comb and do a design with that. Give it some little peaks here, make it look a little fluffier. And there you have it. A chocolate stout cake with a chocolate ganache filling, whipped chocolate ganache with a hint of mint, and our Irish cream buttercream. In the name of quality control, I'm going to cut myself a slice of this and give it a taste. Now, I'm not a coffee drinker, so I would probably have this with a cold glass of milk, but if you are a coffee drinker, you could take the last little bit of this and put that in your coffee. That'd be delicious. All right, let's see how this comes out. Sometimes that first piece doesn't want to cooperate. Beautiful. You've got the moist chocolate cake, you've got the creamy whipped chocolate ganache, and the Irish cream buttercream on top. I'm going to try and get that all into one bite. That's a little bit of Irish heaven. You have a great St. Patrick's Day.